Hello learners, I am Dr. Aparna Samudra from the Department of Economics, RTM Nagpur University, Nagpur. I have been discussing with you regarding the concept of sustainability. In the previous lecture, we had talked about the meaning and the perspectives related to sustainability. When we talk about sustainability, there are two types of sustainabilities which come into mind. One is called as weak and strong. Today in this lecture, we will be talking about both of them. So, the learning objectives will be to define the concept of both weak and strong sustainability and then make a difference between weak and strong sustainability. As you have seen in the previous lecture, there is a general consensus on the adoption of sustainable development. However, debate and discussion still revolve around the meaning of the term sustainability. That is, what should be taken as sustainability? Even though everyone agrees that the rights of the future generations need to be preserved. But what exactly is this sustainability? There is a lot of debate around it. And this debate particularly is between the substitutability of what the natural resources and the manufactured capital. I told you earlier also that the capital is of two types. One, what nature gives us, the renewable and the non-renewable resources, that is natural capital. The second is manufactured capital, which is man-made capital. So the debate is, can people or can the economy use the natural resource and substitute it with manufactured capital? So that debate revolves around whether natural and the manufactured capital, are they perfect substitutes or not? So this has led to two concepts of sustainability. One is called as weak, other is called as strong. And they are the 2 point ends along a continuum. So if we are talking about sustainability like this, so you have weak here and strong sustainability here. So let us understand these two concepts. Let us start with what is weak sustainability. Weak sustainability approach says that there is no fundamental difference between generating human welfare with natural capital or any other type of capital or any specific capital. That is, if we are talking about the production and consumption for the purpose of human welfare, whether we are using natural capital or we are using man-made capital or human capital, they are perfectly same. There is no difference between generating human welfare with using natural capital or using any other form of capital. So, three types of capitals are generally taken into consideration as we just seen. One is a man-made or manufactured capital, which is represented by capital K. Then we have human capital, which we encourage or we develop human by giving them skills, by giving them education, by giving them knowledge, that is human capital. And the third type of capital is natural capital. So keep these three types of capital in mind. That is, we have a man-made or manufactured capital, because when we talk about machinery, it is a manufactured capital. Skills which we give to human beings, the education which we give to our youth, and they develop certain skills is human capital. And then of course, the natural resources are the natural capital. Now, this weak sustainability approach says that the total capital stock, which is comprising of man-made capital, the human capital and the natural capital, should be non-declining over time. That is, when we combine the human capital, we add in the manufactured or the man-made capital, then we also add the stock of the natural capital, we will get the total capital stock. Weak sustainability approach says that the objective of sustainability should be that this total capital stock should not decline over a period of time. That is K plus H plus N. That stock should remain the same over a period of time. What they say? They say that only thing that matter is the total value of the aggregate stock of capital, that is K plus H plus N, which should be at least maintained or ideally increased for the sake of future generations. So Robert Solow, a very well-known economic development economist, he has said that sustainability would mean that if we maintain or ideally increase this aggregate stock of capital, that is K plus H plus N, that is what matters. So, weak sustainability is assuming that savings are invested in manufactured capital or human capital, and these two types of capital are perfectly substitutable for natural capital. That is, if we are talking about the total stock of capital, if by use of natural resources, our natural capital falls, the stock of natural capital declines, if we now start investing in either man-made capital or human capital, the total stock will remain the same. If the total stock of capital remains the same, we say that the country is sustainable. But this sustainability is what is defined as weak sustainability. So the overall objective of weak sustainability is that the total stock of capital should at least be maintained. It should not decline. It should be maintained, and ideally it should be increased, irrespective of the fact whether in this process we are reducing natural capital is okay, as long as you are substituting the decline in natural capital by increasing the investment in man-made capital or human capital. So, this perspective says it doesn't matter whether the current generation uses up non-renewable resources or dumps CO2 in the atmosphere, as long as enough machineries, roads and ports are built in compensation. That is, if today's generation we are using up the non-renewable resources, or because of the production process we are generating CO2 and dumping it back into the atmosphere, it does not matter as long as the decline in these non-renewable resources, the stock of non-renewable resources getting declined, if it is getting compensated by more machinery, by roads and ports, it is sustainable. That is what this weak sustainability says. So, weak sustainability rule means it is relying on two assumptions. First, as economist John Maynard Keynes asserted, in the long run we are all dead. That is, the economic development should be realized in our lifetime. That is, even though we are saying that sustainable development is talking about the rights of the future generations, but as Keynes says that we are, in long run we are all dead. Whatever we have to do in this our lifetime. So we should be concerned by the total stock of capital not getting declined. Maybe you are using up all the natural resources, but if by use of making new technology, you are compensating that decline by having more machines, by having more roads, by having more technology, it is okay. So therefore, according to this assumption means that economic development has to focus on the lifetime, our own lifetime. And the second assumption of this weak sustainability is based on the environmental Kuznets curve hypothesis, which we have already done. If you remember, the environmental Kuznets hypothesis is giving an inverted U. That is, if we have GDP per capita here and we have environmental degradation here, we say as the economy is growing, what happens is that environmental degradation first starts rising, and then after reaching an optimum level of GDP, your environmental degradation will fall. So this is what weak sustainability is saying, that let your GDP rise even if there is a decline in environment quality. Because ultimately we will be compensating, we will be going to a higher level of income, we will be compensating this environmental degradation of natural capital by adding more man-made capital, and ultimately countries will be on a higher per capita income and also the environmental degradation will fall. So this weak sustainability is basically saying that we only have to talk about what is happening in our lifetime, and we have to understand that environment itself starts improving when the economic growth increases. Then, following this principle, this would mean that countries with resource depletion and ecological damage may still look sustainable, no matter if the country is having a lot of resource depletion and there is a lot of ecological damage, but because that natural resource damage is being compensated by man-made capital, the country will be sustainable. However, this substitutability of K and N, that is natural capital and man-made capital, may be one way. Why? Because once transformed to K, once we transform your natural capital to man-made capital, it is impossible to get back to the natural capital. For example, we want to have an expressway, and in order to have that expressway, we are cutting down on the mountains. So we are changing the whole ecological system of that area. Once that expressway is made, we cannot again construct those mountains which we had broken because we wanted to get this man-made capital. So, even though we are saying that they are perfectly substitutable, if it is so, then do you think it is possible to get natural capital back from the man-made capital? So, if this would have been the case, then there would have been there will be no more ozone layer in future. What will we do then? Because we are saying that no matter if ozone layer gets destroyed, doesn't matter, because then we are going to compensate it in man-made capital. But can human beings make ozone layer? No. A very classic case here is of phosphate mining of Nauru. Nauru is a small island where the area was very rich in phosphate. So even though the level of development was very low in that particular island, it's still there, and people thought that if we give this area for mining of the phosphate to the companies coming from the developed nations like Australia, then we'll be very rich, because we are allowing all the mining, we are destroying all the natural capital that we have, but at least by selling off this phosphate mining rights, people of that island will be earning a lot of money, and that happened also. So what has happened today is that 80% of that island is totally destroyed now, because all the phosphate has been mined, and even though people became rich at that particular point of time, but now they are suffering because since the natural resources no more available there, their incomes have started diminishing. So that's a very classic case of a weak sustainability. So weak sustainability is basically focusing on short-term economic gains at the expense of long-term sustainability. So maybe short-term, this population of Nauru got a lot of money, their per capita income increased, but what has happened over a long period of time is that because the whole natural capital, that mineral deposits have gone, they have no way to sustain themselves now. So this brings us to strong sustainability. Now, strong sustainability is an approach which says that the existing natural capital cannot be duplicated or replaced. That is, we cannot replace the natural resources or the natural capital which the environment has given us. It also demonstrates that natural capital cannot just be viewed as a mere stock of resource. We just cannot say that coal deposits is just a stock of resource. Why? Because we feel that these types of capital are complementary. Because if there is natural capital, then only we can have, to work on it, we can have man-made capital. If, for example, as we just saying, that if there is a coal mine and that is a stock of resource, and we just look it as a stock of resource. Now we start using man-made capital to mine that particular coal. But over a period of time, when there will be no coal in this mine, what will the man-made capital do then? So this means that all forms of capital, man-made capital, manufactured capital or natural capital, they are all complementary to each other. All these forms are necessary for any form to be of value. For instance, produced or production capital invested in harvesting and processing timber is of no value in the absence of stocks of timber to harvest, as we just gave the example of a coal mine. Let us say that we have a huge stock of production capital which is used to harvest and process timber. Now, if we just cut down all the trees, and then when there are no trees, means there is no natural capital, then what are we going to do with that man-made production capital which was going to be used for harvesting of timber? So this means that according to strong sustainability, natural capital and man-made capital are not perfect substitutes, rather they are complements. So why do we say that there is non-substitutability of natural capital? One, manufactured capital is reproducible and its destruction is really irreversible. Whereas the consumption of natural capital is usually irreversible. For instance, species extinction is irreversible. If certain species are extinct, you cannot get those species back. If there is a biodiversity loss and certain species get extinct, there is no way in which we can get that species back. Whereas the destruction of material goods or infrastructure is not irreversible. We can destroy, we can make a bridge, we can break it after some time. So this means manufactured capital can be reversed, whereas natural capital once processed cannot be reversed. Second point is, manufactured capital requires natural capital for its production. We have just seen the case of timber. We have seen just discussed the case of coal mining. So manufactured capital will only work when there is natural capital for its production. And then an increase in future consumption is not an appropriate substitute for loss of natural capital. That is, an increase in the future consumption is not a proper substitute for the loss of natural capital. That is, today if I am saying that I am using a lot of natural capital because we want to increase the consumption in the future. And once we get the consumption in the future, with that income we will create human capital and man-made capital. But this cannot be done because this loss of natural capital has already taken place. Therefore, strong sustainability holds that certain elements of natural capital are very critical because they have a unique contribution to human well-being. As we've just seen, ozone layer is a very typical example of this. Right? That is, if there is no ozone layer, it will have a very disastrous impact on the human well-being. So this particular concept of strong sustainability says that every component or this subsystem of the natural environment, every species and every physical stock must be preserved. Because when we talk about natural capital, it is not only the natural environment we are saying, we are talking about the whole ecosystem. We are talking about the biodiversity. So, because this natural capital is most of the time irrepressible, it says that we need to sustain or we need to protect every subsystem of the environment. Now, let us just do a differentiation between weak and strong sustainability. As we've seen this weak sustainability, it is seeing environment, society and economy as three different areas. So, environment is here, this is society and this is economy. Wherever they are intersecting, that is what they say is sustainable development. That is, we are treating all the three components or the three pillars of sustainability as different from each other. That is, environment is operating separately, society is operating separately, economy is operating separately. There is a very small area where they are intersecting. So that is weak sustainability. Whereas when we say strong sustainability, we are saying environment is there and in the environment society is operating and in the society economy is there. Means all these three are interconnected with each other rather than being something like this where they are different from each other and only intersecting at very small section. So according to weak sustainability, it's a very small area in which you will see sustainable development. Whereas strong sustainability is saying that they are encompassing in each other. Each of them is highly dependent on each other. Now, let us do it in a tabular form, aspect by aspect, the difference between weak and strong sustainability. The first aspect we are taking is based on the definition. What does it say? According to weak sustainability, it views natural and human-made capital as perfectly substitutable. That is, you can perfectly substitute man-made capital or human-made capital to natural capital. Therefore, it is allowing for degradation of certain resources as long as overall capital remains constant. So, it's okay if we are destroying some natural capital, if we are compensating it man-made capital. That is weak sustainability. Whereas, when we talk about strong sustainability, we say it emphasizes the necessity to maintain natural capital intact. And it says that human-made capital cannot perfectly substitute the natural capital. Therefore, it advocates for the preservation of ecosystem and the biodiversity. That each and every component of the natural capital needs to be protected because they cannot be replaced by human-made capital. The second aspect on which we can differentiate between weak and strong sustainability is how we are approaching the use of resources. Weak sustainability is allowing for trade-offs between different forms of capital because we are saying that natural capital and man-made capital are perfect substitutes. Why? Because we are going to prioritize our short-term economic growth and development over environment. Whereas strong sustainability prioritizes the preservation of natural resources and ecosystems because it is talking about long-term sustainability. So in weak, we are talking about short-term over long run, whereas strong sustainability is talking about long-term over short-term. The next aspect on which we can differentiate is the social considerations. Weak sustainability overlooks social inequalities and well-being of the future generations. We have just seen it is based on the assumption of Keynes that in long run we are all dead. So whatever development we have to do in our lifetime. So it is generally overlooking it. We are not saying it is not considering. It is overlooking over the social inequalities and the well-being of the future generations because for weak sustainability, the focus is on getting the welfare today rather than tomorrow. So short-term economic gains are more important. Whereas strong sustainability is looking at intergenerational equity and social justice. Then coming to the policy implications, weak sustainability tends to rely on market mechanisms and technological innovations. Why? Because it is saying we can substitute natural capital by man-made capital. So if we are doing so, we have to get more and more of man-made capital because we are using more and more of natural capital. So in order to get the balance, more man-made capital will be needed to replenish the stock of natural capital. Whereas strong sustainability is talking about viability of natural systems in the long term. So it talks about reduction of consumption, responsible production and consumption, life on earth, life below water, gender equality, social equality, decent work standards, whatever we see in the Sustainable Development Goals are also strong sustainability. Some examples of weak sustainability is, for example, substituting natural resources with technological alternatives. For example, synthetic materials. So, for example, renewable energy. They're all weak sustainability. Whereas strong sustainability says that you protect and restore ecosystems, has sustainable agriculture practice, reducing reliance on non-renewable resources are all the example of strong sustainability. So let us just have a quick recap of whatever we have done in this lecture. We have understood that sustainability in its definition is still debatable. There are a few who look sustainability as weak sustainability and other as strong sustainability. Weak sustainability is saying that your man-made capital completely can substitute the natural capital and the social short-term economic gains are more important. Whereas strong sustainability is saying that natural resources also have some inherent value and they cannot be completely substituted by human-made capital. So I hope you enjoyed this lecture of weak and strong sustainability. Thank you very much.